spirit of respect, authenticity, and reconciliation, the town of Slave Lake honors and acknowledges that we are situated on the traditional lands of Sawridge First Nation within Treaty 8 territory, home to Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit peoples who have occupied these lands since time immemorial. Welcome, everyone, audience. Councilor Ferguson was first.
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Any further discussion? Call to question those in favor. And that is carried. So exciting night. We will move forward with the swearing in of our new counselor. Gentlemen.
Stand. I can stand? Yeah.
Okay.
So I just.
Do you guys want to, you can come around this way if you'd like to face the audience, the family with the camera. There we go.
I, Andrew Aduku Achoba, do solemnly affirm that I will diligently, faithfully, and to the best of my ability, execute according to the law, the office of council for the town of Slave Lake. The office of councilor for the town of Slave Lake. As a council member in the civic service of the town of Slave Lake, I will not, without due authorization, disclose or make known any matters or thing which comes to my knowledge by reason of my employment in the public service. I do solemnly affirm.
Do you promise that the contents of your official oath are true and solemnly declare that this promise is binding on your conscience?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead and sign. Yeah. Congratulations. Thank you.
Did you want to take a quick picture with your family before we start the meeting?
Sure.
Okay. We'll let you do that. Yeah, we can move awkwardly out of the way. Hold on. Don't move out of the way. You don't want to.
Pick the chairs to the level.
Hold on, hold on. Here we go. Let's see.
That's it. That's it. Thank you. Thank you. Congrats.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us for the swearing in. Please don't feel obligated to stay for the entire evening and short-term rentals discussion. You're welcome to. But in case you don't feel like it, not offended if you choose to leave at any point in time. All right, is everyone ready? Okay. Councilor Hughes.
Try this again. I will make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the November 21st regular meeting of council as presented.
Any further discussion? Call to question those in favor. And that is carried. Next up, we have question period. Do we have anything for administration? Not, oh, Councillor Moallem, that was.
No, I just, I want to thank, Ashley and our administration department for, running the by-election. I just wanted to see if there was any recommendations, how everything went with, the with doing the by-election?
I think the election went well. We had a really good team. I think this definitely got us warmed up for the next general election. So we're getting excited for that, but we still got some time. So, but yeah, definitely my first time leading it, but it was a lot of fun and a lot of learning.
Fantastic. I think we all had PTSD about taking up signs and. Yes. All right, we'll move from question period then. Laurie, you're up.
Okay. Good evening, your worship and members of council. The purpose of this report is for council to receive and review the background report for the short-term rentals project. So in April, we presented a report to council, and council directed administration to go ahead and hire a consultant to engage with respect to short-term rentals. So on June 16th, we hired Third Space Planning to do the project. Since they started working on the project, they've been working on the background report. So I'll just briefly try to touch on some of the highlights within the report, but of course encourage council to read the entire report in detail. So phase one of the project includes the background research to ascertain the layout of the current conditions in Slave Lake with respect to short-term rentals. The results of the survey, as well as conducting a survey, and the results are being brought forward tonight in another report. Following is a brief summary of the short-term background report. There are relatively a small number of short-term rentals currently operating in town, between 8 and 13. They were all listed on a single platform, Airbnb, and all but one of them is currently licensed. And what that means is there's one bed and breakfast that's licensed. The local traditional accommodation providers, hotels and resorts are reporting a high year-round occupancy rates and there are approximately 650 units of fixed roof accommodation and 412 RV campground sites, sorry. This trend, they believe, took hold in May of 2022, and there are now periods throughout the year where there are virtually no rooms or units available. All stakeholders shared the general perception that the local hotels and resorts are very busy. Some providers indicate a readiness to upgrade and expand, which is good news. Local housing market. Nearly all stakeholders describe current conditions in the town's housing market as acutely bad or challenging. Housing availability was frequently described as extremely low in both the rental and ownership markets across all price points. Rental and ownership units at the lowest end of the spectrum as are described as experiencing the most rapid recent price increases. This overall narrative is generally supported by available data. As of 2021, the census, roughly 1/3 of the town's households were living in housing that was unaffordable, in poor condition and overcrowded. It is reasonable to assume that this number has since increased based on stakeholder interviews. Characteristics of STRs. People normally use short-term rentals to refer to guest accommodations created in residential and dwelling zones. They are distinct in that they are most often involved the renting of an entire dwelling, including associated amenities like cooking and facilities. Cooking facilities and kitchens. They can occur in any housing type versus a typical bed and breakfast, which is typically operated in a large detached home, and the operator does not often live on site. The use of digital platforms such as Airbnb and Vrbo have led to a massive surge in STR activity around the world, more than 1,000% increase over the past 10 years internationally. Currently, the town allows 11 different types of temporary accommodation, including hotels and motels, campgrounds, and RV parks, resorts, boarding houses, bunkhouses, beds and breakfasts, and RVs parked on residential lots. The town's 3 existing temporary accommodation types that are allowed in residential zones do not neatly capture or apply to the most modern short-term rentals. And as such, most unlicensed STRs currently in operation in the town of Slave Lake are not and have never been permissible. Stakeholder interviews, 17 30-minute stakeholder interviews with a mix of local renters, homeowners, STR operators, traditional accommodation managers, business owners, local government officials, and market and non-market housing providers and managers. The interviews were confidential, and as such, rather than attributed statements, this report documents the general thematic findings that emerged across all interviews. In the section that follow, we combine the findings from these interviews with a range to other data sources to describe the current state of the town of Slave Lake short-term rental, traditional accommodation, and housing markets. So STR market data and interview findings summary. There are relatively a small number of STRs currently operating in Slave Lake. However, this number could quickly grow in response to high demand or the traditional revenue flexibility and control that STRs provide to a property owner as compared to renting to a long-term tenant. One or more of these driving factors were cited by all interviewed STR operators. Please refer to the report for more detailed information on this. Traditional accommodation market data and interview findings summary. Local traditional accommodation providers are reporting high year-round occupancy rates driven by a combination of resource activity, seasonal visitors, and events. This trend seems to have taken hold approximately in May of 2022, earlier for some, and there are now periods throughout the year where there are virtually no rooms or units available. All stakeholders shared a general perception that local hotels and resorts are very busy. Housing market data and interview findings. Nearly all interviewed stakeholders describe current conditions in the town's housing market as acutely bad and challenging. Housing availability was consistently described as extremely low in both rental and ownership markets. Housing affordability was consistently described as low, with rental and ownership units at the lower end of the spectrum experiencing rapid recent price increases. This overall narrative is generally supported by the available data. Currency rental vacant rate is 0%. According to the interviewed realtors, current point in time inventory levels in the ownership market are at least half what would be in a normal balanced market, with shortages across all home types and price points. We advise the town to interpret the available data, see page 9 and 10 of the report, as suggesting that there are approximately 740 or approximately 31% of households, or 2,100 people, currently living in unaffordable, inadequate, and or unsuitable housing, and for whom there is currently no realistic alternative. Based on the 2021 homeless and housing needs estimation, which provides supplemental information, the total number of households in some form of housing need with no realistic alternative may be closer to 770. Please refer again to the report for more information. Housing availability and supply, dwellings per capita. The consultant suggested the data in this section should not be relied upon for interpretive purpose without further investigation or clarification of the data. Rental vacancy rates, Government of Alberta rural apartment vacancy and rental cost survey data reports an apartment vacancy rate in the town in 2021 of 0%. The current 0% vacancy rate was corroborated with the interviews with local long-term renter operators and renters. A 0% vacancy rate is, of course, indicative of an acute rental housing shortage. A healthy balanced vacancy rate, again, is somewhere between 3 and 5%. Latent demand refers to the underlying need or desire for housing that is not currently being met in the market. There are no recent estimates of latent demand for housing in the town of Slave Lake, and a rigorous study of the latent demand was beyond the scope of this study. Purchasable inventory, point in time. MLS.ca shows approximately 30 listings at the time of writing, which was September of 2023. Interviews with local realtors suggest this is very low, with a more balanced market indicated by point in time inventory of approximately 60 to 80 listings, and a buyer's market indicated by a point in time inventory of approximately 80 to 100 plus listings. The realtor interviewed suggests that while inventories for the approximately $300,000 are typically low, with more availability in the 100 to 150K and the 600K, all price points are currently experiencing low inventory levels, with condominium and mobile lots especially in demand. Purchasable inventory, with 2 months to go before the end of the year. Year to date 2023 inventory levels for mobile properties are approximately 75% of the 5-year 2018 to 2022 annual average. supporting interview findings that inventories for these units are especially tight. Purchasable inventory days on the market, see report for more information on that. Social and subsidized housing, the Housing Authority reports that they have an average of 3 to 4 vacancies among their approximately 100 affordable seniors housing units and feel that they are well covered for the next 10 to 15 years. The Housing Authority reports a large wait list, 30 to 40 families, for its 77 affordable family housing units, but estimates approximately 80% of this wait list is from out-of-town households. Prospects for new housing, the stakeholder interviews revealed a number of persistent, widely known challenges to getting new housing built, including financing, shortage of local builders, attraction of out-of-town builders, prime sites limited by design standards, town soil characteristics, servicing costs, etc. Housing affordability and ownership, 14.3% of owner households, 227, spent more than 30% of their income on shelter costs. So their current housing is considered unaffordable. 3.8% of owner households, so 60, were technically considered to be in core housing need. But given the current rental vacancy rate of 0%, we believe something closer to the full 14.3% of owner households above should be practically considered in core housing need. A core housing need means a household that is currently living in a home that costs more than 30% of their pre-tax income, or is in need of a repair, overcrowded, or they would have to spend more than 30% or more of their total pre-tax income to pay the median rent of the alternative local housing that is in good condition and large enough. The 2023 year-to-date average sale price of a mobile property was 46% higher than the 5-year average. This reveals a marked decrease in affordability at the lower end of the price spectrum. Housing affordability renting, 30.9% of renter households, so 225, spent more than 30% of their income on shelter costs. 16.4% of the renter households, so 135, are technically considered to be in core housing need, but they feel that the actual is 30.9% for mobiles. The average monthly shelter cost is all rented dwellings at $1,432 a month. This was 13% higher than 2016. Many of the stakeholders we interviewed pointed out that a significant number of the town's lower cost rental units have recently changed ownership, been renovated, and then relisted for significantly higher rents. One stakeholder estimated that this is approximately a $1,300 rising to $1,800, or a 40% increase in rent. Impacts of short-term rentals. So SDRs can bring both positive and negative impacts. So positive benefits are income generation, greater control and flexibility for property owners, higher housing values, greater choices, local experiences, quick new tourist accommodation, more efficient use of space, support for local tourist economy, and greater neighborhood distribution of wealth. Potential harms are housing loss, housing unaffordability, unfair advantage, revenue loss, increased contraventions of local regulations, community disruption, and reinforced inequities. So the themes from the stakeholder interviews, the consistent themes emerged: widespread recognition that the town has entered a boom, serious shortage of housing for residents, both to rent and buy, and a shortage of temporary accommodation for non-resident workers and guests. Many stakeholders expressed concern about STRs decreasing the availability and affordability of long-term housing. Some stakeholders also feel if the number of STRs were to go up, this might change the feel or neighborhoods and or create disruption. Many stakeholders also acknowledge that STRs can provide much needed accommodation for non-resident workers and guests. They also spoke to the ability to earn more revenue with more flexibility and control than renting to a long-term tenant. If the town had plenty of homes, STRs wouldn't be as big a problem. If the town had plenty of hotel rooms, then STRs wouldn't be needed to form a temporary accommodation Many stakeholders expressed a desire to take a business-friendly, permissive approach to the issue but simultaneously recognize the seriousness of local housing challenges and the exasperating effects of STRs. So we're in this sense torn. So summary from the relatively long list of potential benefits and harms outlined above, interviewed stakeholders in the town of Slave Lake were focused mostly on concerns related to housing, availability of temporary accommodation, and perception of business friendliness. And that's all I have for this report. I'm just looking for a motion to accept the report as information at this point. Questions?
I do have a question, Lori.
Sure.
Do we have any historical trends of like the STR growth in town? So right now it's between 8 to 13. For example, a year ago was at 5 and previous to that 3.
I don't
Just,
know.
just so we know what the trend is looking like.
Oh, okay, I could go back and look, but previous to this year, all that I'm aware we had was 1 or 2 approved bed and breakfasts.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that we had any short-term rentals that were using Airbnb or Vrbo platforms.
Thank you.
Counselor Wallem?
Hey Lori, I'm just looking under the potential harms. Are we getting a lot of phone calls or anything to regarding maybe some of the disruptions, community disruptions or anything like that in some of those properties? Like, is that something that's trending upward or something that we should be paying attention to?
It's not something that we're seeing in the planning department. I haven't received any calls. In the survey, some of that information, I think, starts to shake out there, but they're relatively new. I believe, without knowing with absolute certainty, we had our first individual apply for short-term rental in the spring. So I don't believe they've been in the community other than a bed and breakfast for much more than this year. And of course, we've seen it start with one, and you know that we're up somewhere between 8 and 11 of them now. So I don't know that there's been a lot of time yet for people to come forward with concerns other than the responses in the surveys.
Counselor Adams?
Just from personal experience, I know we've had some STRs in the past, obviously unlicensed and not operating, but on Airbnb. I remember 2 years ago looking into this just to see what was in the area, because honestly, I was interested in it from an investment standpoint. And at that point, I know there was at least 5 on Airbnb that I found, some unique odd ones, but
In the town boundary?
within the town boundaries,
Okay.
not outside. And oddly enough, one of them was from Big Fish Bay.
Okay.
But as far as the other, that's all I came up with, but I didn't do an extensive search and research, but that's kind of where I was getting my numbers from them. Just the other thing, in this study, did we talk anything about who the predominant user of the STRs will be? Are we thinking it's vacation homes? Is it oil field workers? Is it like?
I don't know that. Yeah, I don't know. I could ask the consultant that question, but the background report didn't touch on that.
Yeah, I didn't notice that in either one, so I wasn't too sure. Thank you.
Counselor Hughes?
It wasn't identified in here, I don't think, but just a quick question for you. Is there any of them that were identified as RVs or campers that were just being rented out just seasonally in that 8 to 13?
Sounded like one.
Just one?
Yeah.
Okay. So from a tourism perspective, I guess, or from what I know, I would feel that's actually inaccurate, and it's a little bit higher based on just conversations I had with operators throughout the summer as well. There's quite a few of them, I think, at
So are they-
various places.
What our consultant did, and we also went through another company, is they did a deep dive into Vrbo and Airbnb, and then a number of, I think there was like 12 or 13 different platforms.
Yeah, there's a lot.
And they
I'm
dug
sure.
right into them, and
Okay.
they only came, the listings only showed up in Airbnb and Vrbo, and nothing showed up in the others. And we
Okay.
had that done, I believe, in October.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thanks.
might be outside. That might be outside the peak season of what they were looking at.
Yeah, it's
Advertising,
possible. I was just
which
curious.
probably in June, May.
Yeah.
June, right?
Yeah, I think it
makes
might
sense.
just be a seasonal thing for them,
Okay.
kind of that May to September
September
type of
thing.
thing, but yeah.
Okay.
I was just gonna comment, I appreciate the thorough report as well. I think I share the sense as many of the stakeholders of kind of being torn between both sides. And I think just wanting to really proceed with caution on all fronts with this, which is fine because it's just for information today. But I think the stat of kind of the 31% of the households currently like, you know, unaffordable, unsuitable. That really hits home for me. That's quite a few people in the community as well. So I'm happy that we have done the study, and I think it really deserves everyone's time and attention and caution moving forward too. So thank you.
And so just for clarity, for those watching or in the audience today, traditional bed and breakfasts are contemplated in our land use bylaw, but Airbnbs per se are largely not contemplated in our land use bylaw, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, so other short-term rentals other than bed and breakfast, you're correct, they're not contemplated. All that, we have one, I think, one operating bed and breakfast right now that is licensed. And like you said, contemplated in the land use bylaw, and all the other short-term rentals are not regulated and not licensed at this point.
Thank you.
Counselor Adams.
Motion to accept this information.
Any further discussion? Call to question, those in favor? And that is carried. You're still up, Lori.
Okay, this one's not quite as long. The report before you is the short-term rentals community survey number 1. So the purpose is to provide council with the results of the survey. So the first community survey for short-term rental project was launched on October 21st, closed on November 27th of 2023. 100 individuals responded to the survey, which is considered a good response, but as indicated by both the consultant and our communication staff. An 8-question online survey was published on Engage Slave Lake, with residents encouraged to participate via an insert in the town utility bill mailers and via an email to residents who had previously registered on Engage Slave Lake. We also did a $500 gift card as an incentive draw to get as many people out there to participate as we could. A total of 100 people completed the survey, 96 of whom are residents of the town. This sample size allows us to report the survey results with a 95% confidence level and a margin of error of plus 10 percentage points. In other words, if this particular survey was conducted 100 times, we would expect the results to be within 10 percentage points of those laid out in the report. 95 of those times. Okay, this is a brief summary of the survey results. Key takeaways. Third space planning's analysis of the survey data revealed respondents overwhelmingly identified the protection of long-term housing as their #1 goal with respect to short-term regulations, STR regulations. The overall ranking of respondents' preferred goals was consistent across different questions, resulting in the following order of priority, most important to least important. 1 was protecting long-term housing for residents. 2, protecting the residential character of neighborhoods. 3, giving property owners options for more revenue control and flexibility, and creating STR accommodation for non-resident workers and visitors. The above prioritization of goals suggests a relatively restrictive approach to the short-term rental regulations. Survey results were somewhat ambiguous as to the respondents' preferred form of principal resident restriction, if this type of restriction is to be contemplated at all. The survey was not designed to dive deeply into all of the available options for STR restrictions. However, a question related to the different types of so-called principal resident restrictions was posted in this initial survey for the reasons outlined below. When the issue was alternatively framed as a choice between different, sometimes competing ways to achieve certain shared goals, instead of a choice between competing goals, respondents' overall preference was for approaches that prioritize the expansion of traditional accommodation, hotels, motels, resort cabins, etc., and the production and expansion of long-term housing versus approaches that emphasized short-term rentals. Most residents support revisiting the issue if the town were able to achieve a more balanced rental vacancy rates over the long term. So we're just looking for, again, this report is information and looking for a motion and any questions that council might have.
Councillor Adams.
So our first step here was doing our background piece. Then we've doing the survey. What are the next steps going down the path for the public to understand?
Sure. So what I'd like to, if council accepts both the reports this evening as information, like to give you, the next month sort of thing to think about it, mull it over, read through it. We'd like to book a meeting on January 23rd with council and the consultant and administration. And what the purpose of that meeting would be to take the information from these reports and set the goals on what the regulations are going to regulate or how they're going to regulate. Once those goals are set, then we would then start phase 3 of the project, which is the regulation design. This phase of the project includes layout of basic regulation pathways or regulatory pathways. A second community survey would go out, an open house, compilation of all the results from those, and then finally drafting the regulations.
Councillor Adams.
So then step 2 for the meeting that you're wanting to have here
Yeah,
between council and
the consultant.
the consultant and planning. I guess I'm confused as to what are they going to be presenting options at that time, or is this because I mean, really, for me to come up with, I can come up with all sorts of random regulations, but I don't know if any of them are legal or if it makes sense. Is this
Yeah, no, I
what's the point of this?
The point of the meeting on January 23rd, 23 is to identify what council wants as the goal. Is the goal going to be protecting long-term housing? Is it going to be protecting the neighborhood character? Is it going to be supporting short-term rentals?
Or what balance of
Or,
goals?
yeah, and the consultant will be able to go into,
Want
this
it
is
all.
his area of expertise, so he'll be able to go into
There's a visible eye roll there. What
with respect to that.
So
So,
we'd be looking at all of those then on council would be looking at what our goals are on a balance of probabilities. then
Yes.
With
yes,
which is more important.
taking into effect, a consideration, obviously, the background report and the survey information you're provided. Yeah.
Councillor Ferguson.
So I'm not certain if you've had this discussion with the consultant yet or not. So I noticed the the survey was really heavy on the restriction based off of whether somebody lives there or not full time. And anecdotally, like I've used Airbnbs in several communities in Canada, Europe, United States, and the vast majority of the time I had the unit all to myself with nobody having a principal residence there. So that being said, was there any discussions with the consultant about like a quota system, establishing like a quota system in town,
There's
or licensing,
actually-
or is that kind of further down the road?
It is further down the road. I know from reading the toolkit and looking at the background information on these, there's all kinds of ways you can go at regulating this. It just depends on what you want to achieve with the regulation. You can set them up so that they're non-corporations can operate an STR and you leave it only with homeowners. You can have it where the homeowner the unit has to be owner occupied. So maybe the owner lives upstairs and they have a secondary suite where the short-term rental operates from. There's all kinds of ways to look at this. It just depends on what your goal is and how restrictive you want to be and whether you want to get into, some municipalities have gotten into trying to collect the accommodation or hotel taxes and
Okay.
trying to, getting into the equity in residential tax versus commercial tax, all kinds of stuff they're doing. But obviously, those kinds of regulations require manpower to be able to manage and enforce.
Okay, so when we have this follow-up meeting in the new year, those various different options will be presented to us and like their impacts and what they look like for our communities, or like.
I'm not sure, like I would have to talk with the consultant to get a better idea of like how deep of a dive he's gonna go with you. I understand from when I read his proposal is that he just wants to do goal setting. He just wants to figure out what it is that you guys want to focus on. And then from there, we can go into, here's the options. And maybe he's planning to present that. I would have to get that information from him.
Yeah, because like not living, breathing in the industry, right? Like I'm not certain of what all different options exist for restrictions, right? So.
Okay.
Kind of,
Jeff would like to weigh in.
Yeah, and just to clarify, like, again, as Lori is saying, the next step is really a strategic sort of planning. It's not, we're not looking at the fixes or the rules to be implemented or anything along those lines. We're more the direction. Yeah, the direction as to where we want to go with this exercise or with this legislation. So by all means, we shouldn't even be contemplating what those rules are, what they could or could not be at this stage. Right now, we need to determine which direction we want to go. And what our kind of goals are of this legislation that we're looking, or this bylaw that we're looking, or framework and policy that we're looking to implement, right? Once you get that, then we start looking at the tools to achieve those goals, right? So that's like step 5 and 6 further down the road, and there's consultation and there's a number of other pieces that build into those pieces. We're quite a ways from that right now. All you've got ready is a background as to what the current state of affairs are and what the feedback is from the community that had the opportunity to respond, to allow you to hopefully formulate collectively a direction that you want this to go.
thank you.
Counselor Adams,
Motion to accept as information.
any further discussion? Call the question, those in favor? And that is carried.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lori. Next up, we have correspondence.
Okay, so what you have before you here is a copy of a letter received from the High Prairie School Division. It's been presented or included in your package. Would you like me to read it, or have you all read it prior to?
Read it.
Counselor Adams.
Reading through this letter, I'm wondering, at the level this is coming at us, did we receive from the superintendent of High Prairie School Division, did they reach out or contact us as to their questions or any of this that's in the letter?
None whatsoever. None whatsoever. No communication received.
So I guess I'm confused on this, on the timing and the content of the letter. It's CC to the Premier of Alberta, the various ministers that impact both the town and the High Prairie School Division and the MLAs for all the areas within High Prairie School Division. I guess I'm trying to understand why it would go to this stage, right in question number 1. The chair of High Prairie School Division Board of Trustees is aware of the public engagement that's being involved and when it's scheduled to start. So I'm not quite understanding why they're asking these questions. I would like us to respond to this, or at least draft something back that explains where things are at and where the information is accessible publicly. And also, I'd even like to stipulate in there, like, why did we miss a step here in communication? Because honestly, this going to the Premier floors me when you're just asking simple questions.
And I think for context, and just as a review, a little bit of the letter here, a lot of these items were addressed in the initial discussions, and there was a what word am I looking for? Bylaw. There was the hearing, public hearing. Thank you. Sorry, that took me way too long to get to that word. There was a public hearing we had in council chambers regarding the location for the rezoning. And during that time, we discussed many of these issues, especially with regards to the community engagement piece that trustee McGregor was present for. There is the community engagement process for everyone that didn't follow on that meeting starting in the new year. We're looking currently at the best ways to facilitate that. I think from this, we need to have a motion perhaps to direct administration to respond to this letter and the line items that are in here. A lot of them, for instance, such as security measures, well, we have 24/7 security at the shelter. And I think a lot of them have to do with operations. Councillor Adams, you want to weigh in?
Oh, yeah, just on that. I mean, there's even a comment in there it felt like blaming the homeless on the break-ins at the school that occurred back in September, but the shelter. But the shelter wasn't even operational until November 1st.
I don't remember the exact date, but early November.
First week of November.
It definitely wasn't September.
No, that's correct.
So I don't understand again why the information is in there. That doesn't even seem that is in error. This concerns me about our relationship with High Prairie School Division. I would also not only direct that we get this letter in with our concerns and the answers to some of these questions for them, even though they are publicly available. I would encourage us to maybe reach out even CAO to superintendent to try and mend some issue that's here, because
It does feel like it missed a step.
it definitely did. I mean, to take a request for information and slap it up to the Premier of Alberta is insane. I guess I'm trying not to be put too blunt a point on this, but there's steps to be followed here, and just like any sort of communication or requesting information. You don't go run and tell mommy and daddy an issue when you could be dealing with it face to face. There's steps. The superintendent could have reached out to the CAO. There's a request from information from council to council, and then us barring that, and we're telling them to go away. Then you go up to the next level. This seems like we went 0 to 100.
I think that is the summary of the general feeling of the letter as well. I think there's a way that we can respond back to this, just to reiterate the communication with all of these pieces. They have been addressed previously, but we're happy to address them again. And I think that's really important for the public. We can continue to get the information out there and address the concerns of the school division as they are presented in this letter. I definitely believe that addressing homelessness compassionately is important, and that the provincially funded homeless shelter is one of many steps along the way to addressing that in our community. So I would look for a motion for administration. Did you want to make that?
Well,
motion?
I just got one other question, I guess, on that is this something then that we would request to be drafted, would come back towards council before we sent it out, or how does that proceed? I haven't really had to do this before.
Traditionally, it would not come back to council before. I mean, I would take direction from the motion and the discussion we had here and draft a letter appropriately. You know, and with discussion with the mayor, we could, who represents council, can ensure
The
that.
correspondence was addressed to me directly. Usually that is how it works. So generally I would review a letter before it's released.
I'd like to make a motion that we, that to direct administration team to respond to High Prairie School Division with our concerns and answers, and CC all parties on the letter with all the information and links to the information on our websites and social media platforms.
Is there any further discussion on that motion? Okay, I'll call to question those in favor. And that is carried. Administration, the motion's clear?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, state of the lake. Ally, I believe you had some items. I have a list, but you start and see
Yep.
which ones we.
I just wanted to let everyone know that the Chamber of Commerce will be hosting their quarterly membership meeting on Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. at Distractions. This would be a great opportunity to network with other business owners and do some shopping as well.
Well, that was it. Okay, I was prepared for a list. I have my own list.
Thanks for
Counselor-
sharing that,
Counselor
Councillor Walla.
Hughes.
I had one to mention as well. This coming Sunday from 6 to 10 is the Old Fashioned Christmas
Yeah.
Coffee House put on by Stage North at the Legacy Center as well. And they have a couple special performances and just kind of a nice local feel to it. So I think there's still tickets available, and it's only $20, and they're donating some food to, or proceeds to Santa's Anonymous and things like that. So just a great community event that I wanted to highlight.
That was on my list. Anyone else? Perfect. Thank you for not making me go through the entire list of those. We have on Friday, December 8th, we have the 6th annual Stuff the Ambulance with toys or non-perishable food items. This will be starting at 11 a.m. in the Walmart parking lot, with all proceeds going towards the Slave Lake Friendship Center Christmas hampers. So again, that'll be outside the Walmart parking lot, and they are looking for both toys and non-perishable food items that will go to the Slave Lake Food Bank, which is held at the Friendship Center, and then help with the Christmas hamper request for the holiday season. Next up, we also have the Lakeside Fords annual Santa's Anonymous Toy Drive. This will also be on Friday, and this is from 6 to 9 p.m. So toys also can be dropped off at Ford during business hours before then. So if you can drop off a new toy or another present for a child who would otherwise not have anything to open on Christmas. One more on, yes.
No, I was just wondering, in previous years, I think Ford used to run a sleigh through town to pick up toys. Does anyone remember that?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they're doing that again this year. I don't know, if anyone knew about it or.
I'm
That was a kind of a fun thing.
I don't know. We're gonna see Ally on a sleigh through town. I honestly have no idea. The next one, we have one more Saturday, December 9th at the Boreal Center is their winter fun day. It is free. There's outdoor activities, including skiing, snowshoeing, campfires, as well as indoor crafts and games. So we are definitely going full swing into the holiday season here with all the events coming up. And then lastly, I would just like to welcome Councillor Choba to the council table. Pretty quick meeting, getting sworn in and then jumping right into it. So appreciate all the candidates' efforts in running in the election and look forward to having the full team back moving forward. Councillor Hughes, Councillor Ferguson, are you both motioning to adjourn?
I was going to let Councillor Achoba have it as his first motion. if
Oh,
you'd
there
like.
you go.
It would be a
Please go
motion to adjourn. is what it would be.
Councillor Choba.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 7:48.
Any further discussion on that motion? Call to question those in favor. And that is